Good morning, colleagues, friends, and family members. I'm Mary Golden, the Undergraduate Program Director for Interior Design at Rochester Institute of Technology. We are delighted to welcome you all to our Capstone Defense session in support of Haley Giroux. To give a bit of context, Haley embarked on a self-generated design research project with the intention to respond creatively and imaginatively to an emerging circumstance, ongoing debate, and real-world issue relevant to the profession of interior design. She sought out and invited industry professionals to serve as her Capstone Committee members. The program is indebted to these remarkable individuals for their generous acts of service. On behalf of the program, thank you. Haley will introduce her committee in just a few moments. At this time, I would like to introduce our examining scholar, Barry Halperin. Barry is a principal architect at Beardsley Architects and Engineers in Syracuse, New York. Barry, thank you for joining us today. Barry will begin the 15-minute cross-examination following the 30-minute student presentation, and the committee members are invited to provide their remarks at 5 minutes per person. To provide full focus on Haley, we respectfully request that all guests keep phones on silent and that Zoom and video microphones remain off for the rest of the session. Due to the formal nature of this presentation, we will not take questions from the audience. However, we do encourage everyone to reach out to Haley directly to share accolades and engage in conversation following the session. At this time, I invite Haley to present her capstone.
Everyone, my name is Haley Giroux, and I'll be presenting to you my interior design undergraduate capstone proposal, Breaking the Barriers Behind Bars. So I want to thank my committee for their guidance in this project, Mary Golden, our program director, Ann Weis, interior designer at LaBella, Adrien Moyer, the co-founder of the Transgender Resource Center in New Mexico, and Craig Johnson, a chief operating officer at Huther Doyle, and a special thank you to my consultant, Mark Kukuvka, a correctional architect at LaBella. So thank you all for being here today. We'll be touching on the question I'm trying to answer, the findings of the literature review and research agenda, and the creative agenda final proposal. So before we get into this issue, I do want to give a quick trigger warning that I will be mentioning sexual abuse. So the under-researched and controversial issue that I'll be addressing is the transgender prison crisis. Due to the high risk of sexual victimization and hate crime-related abuse, many U.S. correctional facilities have no other option but to house trans offenders in protective custody or solitary confinement, which is up to 23 hours and 30 minutes a day. This isolation restricts access to recreation programs, amenities, and contacts with loved ones, resulting in high rates of depression and anxiety, and can lead to psychosis, self-mutilation, and suicide. A study that recently was released in February of 2024 found that out of 280 transgender prisoners from across the country, 90% reported being housed in solitary confinement at least once during their incarceration. Separately, in a California general population unit, one study found that out of their respondents, 40% reported being forced into prostitution for survival, and 69 reported experiencing sexual assault. Knowing about these struggles, in 2003, George Bush signed into law the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA. This outlines 13 provisions to be followed in correctional facilities to protect this population. Only one out of the 50 U.S. states follow all 13 provisions. PREA states that placing a trans prisoner in protective custody is prohibited unless there are no available alternatives. And it's clear there are no available housing alternatives. So the question I want to answer is, can prison housing be reshaped by trauma-informed and gender-sensitive design principles to improve the security, well-being, and rehabilitative potential of transgender prisoners in the U.S.? Now let's get into the findings of the literature review, which fueled the creative agenda. I explored 6 to 7 areas of research, but for brevity, I will summarize the pieces that informed the design. So I found that the traditional prison environment can create trauma because of the architectural hierarchy and the lack of privacy and abrasive materials. It also forces individuals to conform to the male-female binary system. Prisons are historically designed to be a part of punishment, but the system still expects people to get healthy from an unhealthy environment. Other findings I found that fueled the design solution was Category B prisons in the 70s. These were an alternative to the general population unit that only housed LGBTQ individuals for protection. But this facility closed in 2005 because their poor screening processes allowed in sexually aggressive prisoners and created a predator playground. I theorize that this concept of an alternative housing pod for LGBTQ individuals is still a salvageable concept. Other impactful research I found brought to light principles of trauma-informed design, stating that individuals with trauma can relive experiences, heighten PTSD symptoms, and stunt rehabilitation in triggering environments. Trauma-informed design can help alleviate stress and triggers with natural materials, personalization, natural light, and privacy. And we'll see how this comes into play in the proposal. Now, gender-sensitive design principles are essential here, outlining that people on the gender spectrum require more intense psychological therapy, privacy, and personal amenities, and gender-sensitive design may include more housing options for flexibility in roommate compatibility and privacy, more opportunities for personalization, and access to private showers and all gender-specific amenities. Now let's get into the questions that I found in the literature review that I then conducted in a personal research in the research agenda. So I conducted interviews with 3 individuals that would be running this facility. And first was a correctional officer. So in an interview with correctional officer, Officer Berger, I learned that CO offices were extremely poor with no ventilation, AC, or windows, and it was either located too far away from the unit or it was just a desk in the middle of the hallway. And it was important to learn that COs make rounds every 20 minutes in the day room and they rely on security cameras. So it's important to consider the circulation and location of cameras. The second interview was with reentry and substance abuse therapist at Huther, Doyle, Maria. And I learned that about her patients that were recently released from prison were more open and responsive when they got to utilize tools in her office like sensory, toys, and art therapy. She also mentioned that she felt unsafe in her office because her desk corners her away from the door, and she would ideally want more floor space for her patients to use a yoga mat or yoga balls to get more comfortable during their therapy sessions. Now, the third interview is with the administrator of an LGBTQ safe house through the Center of Youth, Brittany, and I learned that LGBTQ individuals perform best when they're able to express themselves via picking out their own bedding and personalizing their decorations. Now, another important part of this research was a tour I took at the Monroe County Jail. This tour consisted of 2 parts. First part was the mainframe, which was an outdated 1930s jail that housed the most abrasive prisoners. This environment was not conducive toward rehabilitation. It actually created opportunities for aggression and trauma response. The air was thick and it smelled bad, and the bars were sticky to the touch. And the sounds echoed so immensely in the room that when the door closed, it reverbed from across the room. The second part of this tour was the Tower Plaza of the Veterans Unit, which was opened in the early 2000s and was recently renovated. This environment was far more comfortable and the air was clean and fresh with a ventilation system. The newly installed carpet and ACT ceiling grid aided in the acoustics. But I noticed that there was still no windows in the day room. The visitation phone call area was on the mezzanine, which wasn't conducive for ADA or differently abled individuals. And there were columns in the day room that created a lot of blind spots. And so these were areas to consider in the design proposal. Now, the last and very impactful piece of this research was a questionnaire I mailed to 22 different transgender prisoners across the country. This question gauged their gender identity, personal values, experiences with their living quarters, showers, and bathrooms, and their mental health. But for brevity, we'll review the stats that impacted the creative agenda, but if you'd like to learn more, please see the poster and the manuscript. So 10 out of the 22 prisoners agreed to participate in the study from all over the US. It was found that most of the preoperative transgender prisoners were housed based on their biology, except for one trans man who was housed in the male unit and one trans woman who was housed in the female unit. Now, this trans woman was an outlier in this study because she was housed in solitary confinement for protection. She described her cell as having peeling paint and cockroaches, and she had poor gender-affirming healthcare amenities, and she still had to shower in a public shower. Now, it was found that only 3 out of 3 transgender prisoners had access to a private shower, which conflicts with the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And we'll talk more about how the participants' input influenced the creative proposal. Another piece of this questionnaire was I prompted the respondents with if they could draw their living quarters. This discovered that some cells were so small that only one person could move at a time, and most of them reported only a slim barred window, and everyone had a roommate unless they were in solitary. These findings helped refine the scope of the creative proposal by programming spaces to match their personal values and take into consideration their experiences in their living quarters and shower facilities. So now let's get into the final proposal. I propose that a gender-sensitive unit model designed to be trauma-informed, gender-sensitive, and prioritize security and rehabilitation can help reframe the housing of transgender prisoners. The first decision that was made for this space was the model of the type of facility. It was decided that a minimum security New York State prison was the ideal model for a gender-sensitive housing unit, and this is because a county jail's turnover rate is too high, and federal prisons house people that might be on life sentences, meaning they won't be conducive for rehabilitation and reentry. A minimum security prison gives the designer the most agency to include gender-affirming programs, and the population is most inclined to want to be rehabilitated and have returned to their families. An important piece of this program was, research shows that transgender individuals are often miscategorized when placed in facilities, so a program was created for this minimum security prison to address the housing assignment. Now, for brevity, I can't get into all of this, but essentially after an individual is sentenced and after their risk assessment, they go through a series of tests and assessments, and then they are assigned to the gender-sensitive unit and given 30-day trial period. After this 30-day trial period, and they're confirmed to acclimate safely and have healthy assets, then they continue with their trans-informed rehabilitation programs. To learn more, you can see this on the poster or in the manuscript. So next is the site typology of the prison itself. After studying an integrated typology and a cluster and a campus typology, it was decided that a cluster campus would be the ideal model for this program. This is an example of a site of a cluster campus, and this basically means that there's a small array of buildings around a central focal courtyard. This is an example of a cluster campus, meaning there are separate buildings that are rotated around a central courtyard, and each have different programs. So this site is conducive for rehabilitation because it reflects everyday life. Prisoners have the agency to leave in the morning for work and classes, walk around the courtyard to their destination, and keep a schedule that is similar to life outside of prison. Research shows that reflecting normal life gives prisoners responsibility and prepares them for life after release. Now, this project only proposes a solution for the housing unit, which is one of the many buildings on the site. This means that this space will mostly be used in the mornings and in the evenings before and after the workday. Now, this proposal is a replicable building that can be copied and pasted onto any New York State minimum security campus. This means that it can be used in a men's prison or in a women's prison, but not both. It is designed to use for either demographic. So the design of this housing unit began when deciding on a 4-pod unit, each housing 20 prisoners. Using the jail design guide in the International Building Code and a sample housing program from a LaBella project, this program was assembled, allocating the minimum amount of square footage per space, and then printing out these spaces to scale and organizing them like a puzzle, then exhausting every solution until I found one to be the most successful, and bringing that up into 3D using foam. So this foam model allowed me to design for vertical circulation, egress, architectural forms, space adjacencies, and circulation. So this is what an AI-generated rendering might look like of what the exterior of the housing unit. Notice that the walking path leads from the center courtyard into the facility. So entering on the first floor from the central courtyard, one would walk through a small program space, and then through the atrium, which has access from the 4 pods and the back of house space, which is allocated in blue. The first pod to be designed was a cell pod, which was then reflected over the y-axis to create another identical cell pod, which both were then reflected over the x-axis to create 2 slightly larger dorm pods. The corridor in between the 4 pods are staff-accessible corridors, and the remaining symbols on the plan are trees, or what I like to call pocket parks, that are strategically located in the alcoves of the exterior of the building, allowing for natural views from the day room and the cells. So now I'll walk you through the space, through the program space, atrium, and we'll look at cell pod B first. Upon entering the housing unit, one will experience a small program space, and this is designed with lounge furniture and a prisoner-painted mural. This space is designed to normalize the prison environment, making it feel less sterile and creates a sense of place and belonging for the prisoners. It should make them feel like they are in a safe and familiar environment. Now, walking through the doors, you'll enter the central security atrium, and this is where the 4 pods and the staff back of house all meet in the middle. The space is designed to feel more like a reception or lobby space rather than an officer's overlook post, because a hospitality feeling can ease stress and reduce trauma triggers. Now you'll notice that the second floor windows overlook the atrium space, which is accessible through the doors behind the officer desk. So now we'll look at this in plan view. You can see that there's 2 main entrances to this back of house space for the officers, and one is a door and one is a roll-up garage door. Now this roll-up garage door is for carts and other storage boxes to be moved into the service elevator. Other things that are included in this back of house is a staff bathroom, wellness room, and a kitchenette. There's also the floor that accesses the second floor, and we can see what that looks like here. On the second floor, this space is accessible to only the staff. The atrium in the center is open to below, and the windows located around the perimeter of the atrium allow for officers to circulate and monitor activity occurring in the central security room. This also allows for natural light from the atrium above. Now, this second floor is extremely important to monitor the prisoners because each pod has a designated overlook. Each officer station allows officers to monitor the pods in alcoves, and these were designed to be alcoves rather than offices to improve the visual communication between officers that are collaborating on the second floor. Now, the largest room on this floor is for general storage, which is accessible from the service elevator. The remaining rooms on this floor are mechanical and electrical rooms that are associated with each pod, and this allows workers to fix the mechanical and electrical problems without having to enter the prisoner pod. Now, coming back down to the first floor, we'll be entering into the door on the right, which we'll see here in plan view is into pod B. Pod that was used to replicate the remaining 3 pods. In each pod, there are 5 zones for the day room for different activities, including general seating, where there's a multi-purpose table that has game boards printed on the surface, allowing prisoners to play games when they buy pieces off of commissary. There are 2 television lounges, each with a TV mounted on the mezzanine above, and these are designed to feel more residential with movable ottomans and seating imitating couches. A beverage station for hand washing and a trash receptacle. 2 phone call stations that are oriented to face the window. And these stations feature a rocking chair and for prisoners to fidget, a small desk for writing or drawing while they enjoy the view and talk with their loved ones on the phone. And lastly, 3 video call stations for prisoners to contact loved ones. And the location of these is to face the camera out the window as to not expose the interior of the day room to visitors on video call. Now to review the officer zones, you'll notice that the CO station is located at the front of the room with full view of the day room. Staff also have access to a private toilet room and a linen closet, where the linen closet is accessible via the secure entry vestibule, allowing staff to stock supplies without having to enter the pod. You'll also notice that the honor line encapsulates the therapy room and the medical room, and this is because for inmates to have access to the therapy or medical room, they need to be granted access by request or on appointment. This is what the circulation might look like for an officer doing rounds in the space. They would circulate the perimeter of the pod, examining every room, alcove, and program space before heading up to the mezzanine to continue their round. Now, the living spaces on the first floor consist of 5 single cells on the east wall, 2 ADA compliant cells on the south wall. The circulation of the inmates would be intertwined throughout the space using all the programs and amenities. They would also be stopping by the CO station to ask for a tablet or use the tablet charging station that's mounted to the front of the CO station. Now, there is an egress stair in the northeast corner of the pod, and this is accessible from the mezzanine as well. This is what the egress path might look like in the pod in the case of an emergency. Now, there are 4 rooms that would be used by inmates alone, which would require more CO surveillance and security cameras. And that would be the shower alcove, the laundry room, the ligature-resistant quiet room, and the spiritual practice room. Now, we'll get into how direct views of the shower alcove and laundry room can be viewed from the CO station, but the quiet room, which is ligature resistant, is essentially like a timeout room for when individuals are acting out, and this limits them from activities for no more than 90 minutes. Now, the spiritual practice room would be available upon request or by approved time. Now, there are 3 rooms here that would be used by both staff and prisoners. Research shows that prisons that have smaller staff to inmate ratios actually improve the quality of rehabilitation. So these pods have a ratio of 1 to 20, unlike jails, which have a ratio of 1 to 50. These rooms give COs opportunities to build relationships with the prisoners, to increase trust, decrease aggression, improve the quality of rehabilitation. So we reviewed the types of spaces on the first floor, but there are 4 rooms that make this a gender-sensitive environment. First is the medical triage room. This proposal includes a medical room because transgender individuals require gender-affirming health care. This includes access to hormone therapy, hygiene and grooming amenities, as well as, opportunities for physical assessments. In the prisoner questionnaire, it was found that one participant was undergoing physical assessments to prepare for top surgery. And every time they were called in for assessment, they had to be escorted off the campus to a separate hospital. So to include a medical room for transgender prisoners to receive their daily medication, their hormone therapy, and medical examinations, this would alleviate the need to have to escort individuals off of campus. The next room is the multi-purpose room, the spiritual practice room, and the one-on-one psych room, and we're going to take a look at that. The multi-purpose room is included in this proposal because it was discovered that transgender individuals require various forms of therapy, personal expression, and supportive community. This space is designed for group therapy, workshops, arts and crafts, writing seminars, and other enrichment programs. This in-house program space would allow prisoners to sign up for events at their own will, reflecting normal life, allowing them to create more of a schedule, and by participating in community building activities, expressing themselves, and partaking in other therapeutic interventions, they can take greater steps in their rehabilitation journey. Now, the colors in this space reflect my research on color psychology. Yellow causes the body to release serotonin, blue is calming and can help reduce heart rate and blood pressure, and purple creates a sense of place. The next room is the one-on-one therapy room. Trans individuals require gender-affirming psychological therapy, so allocating a space for intimate therapeutic conversations creates opportunities for these individuals to form relationships with the staff, reflect inward, and take significant steps in their rehabilitation journey. This room was designed for flexibility. As discovered in the research agenda, allocating enough floor space for an individual to use a mat or sit on the ground to get more comfortable can help with their therapy session. And the furniture in this space is flexible. The prisoner can use the desk for art therapy, rock in the rocking chair for sensory input, and the therapist can even pull in another rocking chair for a more intimate dialogue. Now, the last trans-inclusive space on this floor is the spiritual practice room. In the questionnaire responses, almost all of the participants shared that they practice some form of spirituality, and practicing their values instilled them with feelings of groundedness, purpose, and an opportunity to look inward. Providing these opportunities to individuals to express themselves and practice reflections are elements of trauma-informed design. Providing a safe environment for recollecting one's thoughts is proven to help reduce feelings of anxiety and irritability. So now we've completed the first floor of these pods, and let's talk more about what the mezzanine looks like. The mezzanine consists of 5 single cells on the east wall and 4 double cells on the south wall. The mezzanine itself is designed with a floor-mounted game tables to help normalize the environment, and it was designed with considerations of the jail design guide, which states that dead-end mezzanines must not make path of travel longer than 50 feet. So let's take a deeper look into the housing spaces. There are 5 types of spaces in this proposal, and this is because individuals on the gender spectrum may need to move around and select different types of housing that are more conducive to how they prefer to live. So the first type is a single cell. This design took into consideration the questionnaire responses that stated that the toilet unit would be located right next to their face as they were sleeping. So this design includes a small 6-inch brick and mortar partition wall to zone out the room to be more comfortable. Next is the double cell. Using the same principles, the desk and work areas are segregated from the toilet unit and include adjustable task lighting. Trauma-informed design principles include adjustable task lighting to give individuals agency in the space, letting them control the level of light produced in their room. So this unit is now complete, but it's important to talk about the lines of sight that were considered to allow the COs on the first floor to better monitor the day room. Now, in a 3D view, we can see that the officer's point of view have clear sight lines into the shower alcove and the laundry room. Now, the alcove is highly monitored to reduce the risk of sexual victimization. And although each shower stall has room for changing and showering in private. Now, looking straight forward in the day room, you'll notice that there might be blind spots behind the mezzanine stair and in the back corner near the egress stair. Though the day room used to have columns spanning the room, causing more blind spots, that issue has been alleviated through dispersing the weight of the building in a truss system rather than columns. Though these spaces still are not as visible, it would be important to include cameras in these areas for surveillance. Now let's look at what the materiality might look like in these areas. So a section cut of the cell pod depicts material selections, acoustical treatments, the truss system, and the day room skylights, as well as the CO overlook. All the furniture is Norix, weighted poly detention furniture, and the day room flooring is Noraplan EnvironCare rubber tile. The housing flooring is Duraflex seamless epoxy flooring. Now, the day rooms were acoustically treated with Armstrong ceiling infill panels and Turf Tectum high NRC acoustic panels on the wall. The feature wall above the program rooms can feature a motivational mural with standoff panels, and these panels can be rotated and replaced and can even feature prisoner artworks to better create a sense of place and belonging in these pods. So this completes the cell pod, and now we'll review what's different in the dorm pod. So in the dorm pod, what differs the most is the ADA cells, which now have become mother-baby cells. Inspired by the Belford Hills Correctional Facility, offering opportunities for pregnant mothers to live with their newborns for the first year of the baby's life is proven to enhance the quality of life for both parties. Designated cells for mothers to feed, change, and sleep with the baby will instill the mother with a sense of purpose, drive, and responsibility. This is an extremely valuable opportunity and has proven to reduce recidivism rates in mothers, instill a deeper bond with loved ones, and reflect normal expectations of post-relief life. Additionally, this visualization is an example of the Paint a Wall program. Prisoners can paint a wall in their living arrangement after a certain amount of time and for a small fee. And this will help affirm their gender expression and allow for more opportunities for personalization. Now, the mother-baby cell was designed to be ADA compliant. With the removal of the crib, the cell is only slightly larger than the cell pod's ADA cells. This comes into play when there are no pregnant mothers that are in need of housing, and the unit is replicated on a male campus. So moving to the mezzanine, let's look at the housing solutions there. Instead of cells, there are 2-person dorms and 4-person dorms, but still keeping the 1:20 ratio similar to the cell pod. Now, the 2-person dorms feature more Norix furniture like wall-mounted poly shelving, a wardrobe, and freestanding desks. The freestanding elements allow the individuals to move around the desks and the wardrobe, giving them opportunities for personalization in the space. Now, the 4-person dorm is the largest housing option, and the dorms are designed with a small in-house toilet and sink stall. The door to this bathroom stall still allows for officers to see 18 inches above and below the door, and the dorms were all designed with attack-resistant storefronts for views from the CO post, which we can see coming into play here on the mezzanine. The storefronts allow COs to see the arrangements inside of the rooms. So now let's look at the materiality of the dorms. All pods include a wall-mounted commissary computer. The ceilings that might be accessible to prisoners are Gordon cell line tamper-proof security ceilings, and the lounge spaces are designed with durable Tarkett power bond carpet. And the mezzanine stair can be customized with powder coat on the stringer and open grate treads. So as we come to a close, I do want to reiterate the amount of potential that a design like this may possess to have a meaningful impact on this desperate population. About 1.4 million people in the adult US population are transgender, and studies show that at least 1 of 6 transgender people have been incarcerated at some point in their lives. That's over 220,000 individuals that face or have faced the injustices of traditional prison design. So this capstone hypothesizes that gender-sensitive unit that is reshaped by trauma-informed and gender-sensitive design may provide safe housing, increase rehabilitative potential, and restore basic human dignity. Thank you. So I want to invite my cross-examiner on Zoom, which hopefully you were able to see all of it this time. And I'd like to hear your feedback.
Yeah, I think you're talking to me. This is Barry. Hi.
Hi, Barry.
Yeah, my feedback, I guess some of the things that you spoke about and some of the things that you showed during the presentation, I think evolved a bit since whatever the package was that was sent to me. But I had a series of questions and comments that I wrote down and didn't put in the proper forms, I think, and I may have to send it afterwards. But one of the things that popped into my head was just to understand context is the percentage of the prison population as a whole, what kind of percentage is that? Meaning to give us context about whether we want to make dedicated pods or not in future, since you said the idea was salvageable. Do you know that number?
I do know that in the US, we have tracked over 4,200 transgender prisoners in 45 different states in Washington, D.C. So if you find that 4,000 is a decent percentage, then it's a possibility.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, that tells me something. Yeah, you gave us the typical ratio of COs to inmates, which I didn't find in the written stuff that I reviewed, so that's helpful. And that kind of leads to another thought is, let's see, how's the best way to put this? The population that you're proposing to serve or support here, they do have special needs, I think, and I agree, and I don't have a problem with what you presented. But the question is, what among the things that you decided were 5 program pieces or environmental choices or design choices that you made wouldn't also be very helpful to the general population?
That is something that I did. I wrote a quick blip about that in the manuscript where I mentioned that these elements would also be conducive for any kind of individual, whether cisgender, LGBTQ, whoever. I think that providing psychological therapy and having in-house programs can benefit anyone in the space.
Yeah, I would have thought that would be the obvious answer, but just with the idea of a whole different ratio of staff to inmates. My very limited experience with this stuff is they try to minimize how much staff they put in a place. So if you're making something that multiplies the number of staff that you need, you might get pushback on that, I would think, from the people that manage them and pay for them. So food for thought, I think. Is this the same layout for all the pods or not when you're making a building. And it seems to counter the concept that you cannot segregate people out. And so did you feel that the PREA presented design obstacles as opposed to supporting the people in this situation?
That's a good question. I think the fact that transgender individuals are required to have a private shower space was definitely a design obstacle. And this is because most prisons are designed to have obviously communal showers and communal bathrooms, especially in dormitories. So having that kind of availability for this number of people is definitely a struggle. So I hope that the shower alcove that at least has fewer stalls and better visibility can kind of mitigate that issue.
Okay, yeah, that's at least one. Yeah, I couldn't think of other ones, but my example or to myself was, is there something that's prohibited that you wanted to do? And frankly, do you think that the rules in the PREA are realistic, I guess, given the nature of the beast, the COs and their personalities and their training, there's layers of things that probably need to change there as well.
Yeah, I think the expectations of the Prison Rape Elimination Act are a little high because half of them include social changes, using the correct pronouns, calling people by their correct names, and, practicing the training that COs are receiving and adequately being a good CO and not being discriminatory, I think is the most difficult element of the PREA because you can't guarantee that everyone's going to follow it. So yeah, right.
Yeah, simply put, yes. One thing I thought when I was writing notes to myself was, did you or should you look at the potential